Today, we're going to look at a topic that's often misunderstood: China's geopolitical strategy and how it's reshaping the global landscape. This isn't about taking sides, it's about understanding the long term thinking that's made China a powerhouse and why the rest of the world sees it differently than many in the West. Let's talk about it. 大家好，我是 Surant 在中国. Hey everyone, it's Surant China. How y'all doing today? I hope you're having a lovely day. I'm having a fantastic day myself over here in Heyuan, Guangdong Province, China. As you can see, I'm staying in a great hotel room that not only offers a giant projection screen, daily free laundry service, but a free buffet lunch, dinner, and breakfast. If you want more information about this trip, check it out on my Sir Ant Travels channel. There'll be lots more information there. And hey, while you're there and while you're here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and help both channels grow. I really, truly appreciate it. And I thank all of you who have helped me with donations and with even just throwing me a thumbs up. I really appreciate it and it really helps. But now let's get to today's topic. Chinese leaders are some of the most sophisticated geopolitical players on the planet. Why? Because they don't just think about tomorrow. They're planning 5, 10, and even 20 years ahead in the future. This is a very common Chinese cultural characteristic. The average person saves money and plans for the future 20, 30, and even 40 years in advance. And it's this long-term mindset that shapes everything the government does, from trade deals to infrastructure projects. To illustrate, let's go back to 2001, when China proposed a free trade agreement with ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. At the time, ASEAN was seen as pro-Western, yet no Western country offered a similar deal. China saw an opportunity to build ties with its neighbors, anticipating that the U.S. might one day try to contain its rise, a narrative often heard in contemporary U.S. political speeches and press releases. The result? Trade between China and ASEAN skyrocketed from 40 billion in 2000 to nearly 975 billion by 2022, making it the world's largest trading relationship. That's the power of thinking ahead. Now, this foresight extends to innovative projects like the Belt and Road Initiative, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, and the New Development Bank. These projects aren't just about building roads and banks. They're about creating deep, substantial ties with countries across Asia, Africa, and beyond. China knew that strong global connections would act as a buffer if tensions with the U.S. ever escalated, especially under a president like Donald Trump. And speaking of Trump, China's leaders have done complex cost-benefit calculations. They know a Trump administration might ramp up bilateral pressure. Think tariffs or sanctions. But they also expect Trump to alienate U.S. allies, who he often views as liabilities rather than assets. This extends far beyond Asia. Even close allies and neighbors like Canada and Mexico are not safe from these political shenanigans. There have been efforts by previous U.S. administrations to rally Asian allies against China, but those could weaken dramatically under a less diplomatic approach, giving China a lot more room to maneuver. Now, here's a perspective shift for my American viewers. The U.S. represents just 330 million of the world's 8 billion people. Yet, many Americans have been shaped by a deeply negative portrayal of China, one that paints it as a global threat bent on domination. Most North Americans I personally know, at least 80 to 90%, honestly, view Chinese leadership as an evil authoritarian regime bent on not only oppressing its own citizens, but destroying the Western way of life. When I ask why they believe that, or if they can give any examples of these horrific abuses of power, not one of them can offer more than a name of some distant event or location they honestly know nothing about. Tiananmen Square, Tibet, Uyghurs, etc. So even though they cannot explain why, they still strongly believe in the evils of China, just because. But here's the thing, that view is not shared by the rest of the world. If you travel to Asia, Africa, or even parts of Europe, you'll find that China is seen less as a villain and more as a reality to engage with. Currently, most countries are strengthening ties with China, not cutting them. Take Japan and India, for example, two of China's major neighbors. Yes, they're cautious about China's rise, and who wouldn't be when a neighbor's economy grows from 1/10 the size of the US in 1980 to nearly matching it today? But both countries have increased trade with China, and India, despite tensions since 2020, is working to normalize relations. These nations see China as a fact of life, not an enemy to demonize. Part of the disconnect comes from unrealistic expectations. Some in the US hoped that as China integrated into the global economy, it would morph into a liberal democracy mirroring America. But China is a civilization more than 5,000 years old. Why would it model itself after a 250-year-old republic? That assumption was, frankly, naive. China's political system is rooted in its history, and expecting it to become a carbon copy of the US is completely unrealistic. Another common misconception is the tendency to demonize Chinese President Xi Jinping. In the US, he's often portrayed as a cartoonish villain, Winnie the Pooh. But globally, he's respected by many leaders as incredibly competent and strategic. China's economy, despite a rough patch, is still projected to grow at 5% annually, outpacing most major economies. And it's investing heavily in future industries: electric vehicles, solar panels, batteries, green energy, healthcare, infrastructure modernization, etc., far more so than any of its competitors. So, this brings us to a critical point. China's manufacturing ecosystem is unmatched, period. It is the backbone of global supply chains. Ask yourself, what would Apple be worth without its production in China? Or Tesla without its Shanghai Gigafactory? American companies rely on China's infrastructure, and that's a reality we can't ignore. A leading economist from Columbia University has talked about two China shocks. The first came in the early 2000s, when China's entry into global manufacturing disrupted jobs in the West. Workers in the US and Europe weren't given enough retraining or support, and that fueled resentment. But now this economist warns of a second shock. China is now so advanced in manufacturing that Western economies may need to copy its innovations to stay competitive. That's right. The West might need to learn from and start copying China. So, what does this all boil down to? Well, China isn't a monolith to fear or demonize. It's a serious competitor with a long term vision. The US and its allies would benefit from a realistic approach. Engage with China where it makes sense, compete where necessary, but avoid isolating themselves with outdated narratives. The modern world is interconnected, and understanding China's strategy is key to navigating it. So, how do you see China's role in the world? Should it continue to be feared by the West, or should the West take a lesson from its ongoing success? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, thank you for joining me, and I will see you in the next video. 再见。